All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'll say cheers to you here. Oop, that's probably a little loud on the microphone. Didn't mean to put it right next to it there. Down here in the Bahamas, but today's topic, and I'm talking about boat maintenance. So I've always said that I think boat maintenance is probably the biggest barrier to entry for people that want to go do the cruising and sailing lifestyle because it's not intuitive for everybody. For a lot of people, it is. For me, it's always been intuitive because I think maybe because my family, very young, I think in fourth grade they sold. We sold or fifth between fourth and fifth grade. My parents sold their original home, and then they flipped houses for man. They probably flipped 20 houses by the time I was 20. Since that age, right? So that was kind of before it was trendy. This was like in the 80s, right? And so that's how they kind of. My father was a pilot. My mother was well a stay-at-home mom for the most part, but she did. Honestly, she was the one that did most of the work on these houses because my dad would be working. So they would flip houses, and so then I learned everything from electrical to plumbing and all that, and how to build stuff, how to tear down walls and do all that. Because I'm the young slave labor. They had to put me to work, to earn my keep there. And my the thing I hated the most, just side note, is moving. I hated moving. It was just such a pain in the butt having to like box everything up, and then I didn't mind doing the work on the houses, but I hated moving. Anyway, so I'm going to go over like some of the top things that you need to know about sailing and cruising when it's in regards to maintenance and upkeep on the boat. What you need to expect to be able to know how to do, and then maybe we can talk about how you can learn those skills. Just off the top of my head, real quick. Like you can learn almost anything on YouTube. You want to know how to change an impeller on a raw water pump? Well, I've actually got. So if you join the Sailing Doodles Navy, go to sailingdoodles.podia.com. At I believe I'm not sure what level it is. I think it's like $18 a month. You get access to all my maintenance videos. I show you how to change an impeller. I show you how to change a water pump. I show you how to do quite a few things. So yeah, that's a and actually I'm about to go record another one this afternoon. I'm going to change the macerator pump and show you guys how to do it. But anyway, so um, that's just my personal experiences on boats, and that's how I learned to do all this stuff, and just learn by trial by fire, right? I didn't know everything I need to know on a boat. I still don't. You never know everything you need to know, but it is one of those things that uh, you kind of learn as you go, and sometimes you don't know how to do something, you need to know how to do it. But again, you can learn anything on YouTube and all that. So let's uh, let's see here. All right, so the two golden rules of cruising maintenance: fix it before it breaks. So you need preventative maintenance. That could be, and then of course, if you fix it, you'll know how to fix it later. So the two rules there. So fix it before it breaks, and if you fix it, you'll know how to fix it again later because it will break again. It's just a boat. So preventative maintenance. You need to change your fuel filters. You need to change, the zincs on the boat. So if you don't know, there's electrolysis, right? So it doesn't matter. That's like if the winds had a big problem with this. They had stray current going through their boat. So there's stray electrical current. It doesn't matter how well grounded the boat is. There's always going to be a little bit, like a milliamp, right? Or half a milliamp or something like that. Well, when your boat's in water, so it's conducting that electricity through your boat to the water. And then it really does that through metal fittings that reach the water. So think your rudder or your prop shaft or your prop and all that. So what you do, especially on your rudder and on your prop shaft and all that, you'll have these, they're called sacrificial zincs. So they are, zinc is a very soft metal and kind of corrodes very easily. And so the electricity goes through the prop shaft to that that zinc, and then the zinc distributes that to the water, and it does a little electrolysis, and it dissolves a little bit of that zinc. And so it's a sacrificial zinc because you change those zincs out every 2 years. So rather than it eating through your prop or your propeller shaft or whatever, your prop shaft, it does the zincs, and you replace those every year or two, or probably every year. So that's, preventative maintenance, and then that you need to do, and we'll kind of get into more of that later. But if you fix it once, so how many times have I, changed an impeller, right? The first time I didn't know how to do it. I had to look it up how to do it. I watched a YouTube video on how to change an impeller, and then now I know how to do it, so I don't have to look it up. So the more you work on your boat, the better you get at it, the more you learn, and then the easier it becomes to do other things. So like just for instance, the other day, I there weren't any YouTube videos on it. Thankfully, the previous owner of this boat found, because he had to rebuild. He had the same problem. So my boat has twin hydraulic rams that move the rudder, and one of them he had already rebuilt because it had a leak. And I mean, the rams are more than 30 years old now, so the seals go on it, right? And so, sure enough, the other one let go just a few weeks ago, and we were left using the emergency tiller, which was not fun. So then I had to rebuild the uh, one. Luckily, there was a guy flying down that was a friend of a friend that I was able to get him a new seal kit, and he brought it and flew it in to me, and then I changed the seal. I didn't know how to do it. I'd never done anything like that really before, but luckily the previous owner found the instructions on how to do it, because there was no YouTube videos on how to do it. So we were talking about preventive. We'll go to your daily and weekly maintenance. So, that's everything from engine checks, your oil, your coolant, your belts, and you check for leak. Maybe you don't do it every time you start up the engine, but like once a week. When you start up the engine, open up the engine hatch and just look. Are you spraying any water out? Is there any leak? Is there any oil pumping out? Is there fuel leaking somewhere? So you got to check that stuff. And check your coolant. I check the oil and coolant maybe about once a month is as how often I'm doing that. So, but you don't have, it's what you want to do. Your battery voltage and electrical. That's one thing, you should monitor basically every time you start up the motor. As I certainly do. I look at my voltage and make sure that it's charging. It's got to be somewhere around 13 volts, right? If it's charging, or before you even start, you can check the voltage on your system and say, okay, is it it depends on if you got lithium or whatever, but my boat normally has at least 12.6 volts, and because it's all lithium. An AGM may not have that much, maybe around 12.2, 12.3, but you want to check the voltage. If it's down around 12 or 11 something, you got a serious problem there. You want to check it. Bilge pump operation. You want to check that once a week. Make sure your bilges aren't filling up. Um, because if you had a bilge pump fail and you didn't know it, it may fill up your bilge. Now you're supposed to have a high water alarm on your boat, so if that if that alarm detects water above a certain level, it'll make an alarm. Not everybody's works though, so you never know what's going to happen. Water maker, so you need to flush that once a week. So if you have a water maker, so you have a desalinator. So the way it works is it's a reverse osmosis. So you put salt water and it puts it through a uh, high pressure filter that filters out all the salt and impurities, and out the other end comes the clean water, and then it bypasses the salt water that goes overboard. You need to flush that system once a week because and after every time you use it. So after every time you use the salt, um, the water maker, you flush the system, which essentially back flushes it with fresh water, so it pushes all the seawater uh, out of the filters and everything, because the seawater is going to have little microorganisms in it, and they're going to grow bacteria and all that inside those filters. So you want to flush it after every use. And then if you're not going to, if like I use my water maker basically every week, so then after every use I will flush it. But I also have mine set on a timer. So Rainman Water Makers, they're a sponsor. So you can check them out, rainmandesal.com. Tell them you saw it on Sailing Doodles. And it has an automatic timer where once a week it will automatically flush. Now, if I hit the flush button on there, it'll reset that for another week, but so it doesn't just waste water. So you're cleaning your intakes. That's not, it's a good thing to do weekly. I don't do it weekly. I probably check it monthly, or honestly, sometimes when it's a problem. So your engine and your generator, and then a few other things. I mean, obviously, there's an intake for the water maker and the air conditioners and all that. But they're more important for the generator and the motor. So it takes raw seawater and sucks it into the boat through a hose, and goes through what they call a heat exchanger. So the seawater goes, there's like fins, or there's tubes inside this raw water maker, or sorry, the heat exchanger, that's kind of the two fluids don't actually mix, but they cross over each other through tubes. And so you have the cool seawater cooling down the coolant that goes through your engine and your generator. And you need to check the intakes on those because they can clog up with seaweed and debris and whatever in there, and then it restricts the flow, so you're not cooling your engine as well. So that's the thing to do every, weekly is a probably good idea. Do I do it weekly? Not really. No, I generally maybe once a month or whenever there's an issue. Your motors are supposed to start telling you when they're getting warm and shut down, or at least have a warning horn for you. And so then, yeah, pay attention to that. And then, sails and rigging, visually inspection. So you just got to make sure that there's no rips, there's no tears, you're not losing any fittings and all that. And then your rigging, that's another thing. Every 10 years or so, you should probably have it you should probably have it tuned every couple of years by a professional, and then have it replaced every 10 years or so. All right, so now on to monthly and seasonal checks. Okay, this is where we're going to oil and fuel filters and all that. So yeah, like I said, about once a month, I check the oil on my generator and my motor, and I also check the fuel filters. So most big boats like this, especially using diesel, have fuel filters. And because the fuel can be really dirty down here, plus it sits in your tank. I have 300 gallons of fuel. It'll sit in the tank. I only get fuel every maybe 6 months right now. And so that fuel sits there a while and stuff will grow in it. You can put a biocide, and you should put a biocide in there when you fill up your fuel tanks. That helps because like bacteria and crap can grow in diesel and grows in the tanks, and it eventually will get sucked into your fuel system. So most boats have what's called a Racor. So it's a fuel and water separator. So water, they think for some reason, I don't know why, but water is actually heavier than diesel fuel. So it pulls fuel into this Racor system, and it kind of spins it around, and it sucks it through a filter, and then it goes to the generator. So the water will sink to the bottom of that. So you can look in the bottom of that Racor bowl, and you can see there'll be a little line in there you'll see like a kind of a yellowish clear liquid or murky, and then there'll be like a red tint above that because most marine diesel is red tinted. Depends on where you are. And so you'll see like a water line there, and it separates because oil and water don't mix. So the water stays at the bottom. And so, once a month, you got to go and drain that water out of the system because you're never not going to have any water in there. You get condensation just through the air, right? So it'll condensate on the inside of those tanks and then drip down in there. So those are the fuel filters. Prop shafts and your cutlass bearings. That's a good idea to check. So different boats do different things. So like most catamarans have what they call a sail drive. So it's basically a transmission that turns vertical. So the transmission comes out of the back of your engine, and it gets turned down and then goes straight through the bottom of the boat. And then there's a transmission on the sail drive that turns it horizontal. And so you want to check the seals between there to make sure that it's not leaking. And then you want to check those have oil in them as well. And you want to check that oil is not frothy or bubbly or murky, because that means you're getting water into the oil system, and that just eventually will degrade the system and cause friction. So you want to check that. And then mine has an actual prop shaft, which has a stuffing box. So it's just really thick. I don't even know what it's made out of, kind of a cotton or a synthetic material, and it's stuffed in there around the prop shaft. And so you push it in so tight that it kind of expands and goes around that prop shaft, and it keeps water from leaking. Well, occasionally, just through friction, you're going to wear down the inside of the stuffing box, and you have to tighten it down again to put that pressure on there to keep water from leaking in. And really, it might just drip a little bit when the shaft is not moving, but when it's turning, it can be just, especially if it's needs to be adjusted, you can just be pouring water into the bottom of your boat. So you want to check that out. And then, see, this would be more like a seasonal check. You can check the lubrication on your deck hardware, like your winches and all that. I'm really bad about that. Like, I don't know if these winches have ever been serviced, but I serviced them for the first time. Who knows? And yeah, some of them were pretty dry. And like, for instance, we were using our spinnaker halyard to lift up the dinghy. And when we first did it, we were having a really hard time with it. It was really hard to turn that winch because I don't know when the last time that winch had been serviced. I pulled it apart, and it was really dry with like really dirty, thick grease, and it wasn't turning very well. So I took all that apart, cleaned it, put new grease on there, and now it turns a lot better, and the dinghy gets lifted up on board a lot better. And that's the same with your winches for your jibs and all that stuff. And then seasonally, like I said, you can do your zincs. That's more like that for me. That's a yearly thing. You can You can change them underwater, but generally I just do. I mean, I'll every time I go snorkel around the boat, I'll check on the zincs just to look at them because sometimes they fall off, right? I mean, they're not bolted on there too well. They're meant to fall off or degrade, right? And they'll fall off. So I will check those to make sure they're okay. And then if so, that's more. You don't have to replace them, but seasonally at least every month, maybe just snorkel on the boat, look for your zincs, and then if it needs to be replaced, it needs to be replaced. And then certainly anytime you come out of the water, especially if it's been like a year, just go ahead and replace the zincs. They're cheap and easy to do when you're out of the water. When you're in the water, you can still replace them, but it's a lot harder. You probably need, like a scuba gear or a like we have the Blue Nomad tankless dive system. And then your safety gear. You want to check your batteries and your fire extinguishers and your flares and all that stuff. All right, on to tools and spares that you need to have. Basically, I mean, I have every tool known to man. Not every tool. That's not true. I have, um, you know, multiple sets of screwdrivers. I have ratchets and wrenches, both in metric and SAE, because you never know what's what on a boat. Sometimes you get a French boat, it's all in metric, but this is a Taiwan boat, but it's been so old and hacked into so many times, it's got a lot of SAE in it. So, you need both of that. And then hammers and all these other tools. I have a sawzall, I have sanders, I have circular saws, I have drills, I have impact drivers. What else do I have? I have, belt sanders. I have a leaf blower. And then, thankfully, just the other day, thankfully, the previous owner of this boat left a bench press, not a bench press. What are those things called? Vise, a vise press. What is it? Am I saying that right? I'm not sure what that word is, but a vise where you tighten something down in there. So when I was changing out uh, the seals on the hydraulic ram, I couldn't hold that ram and turn some because it's covered in hydraulic oil and you're not going to be strong enough to do that. So I had to put that ram in a vise, tighten it down where it wouldn't spin so I could unscrew some stuff on it. So thankfully I had that on board. And then you need all kinds of plumbing parts, Teflon tape, all kinds of just basically you need to, if it's in an automotive, if it's in a Pep Boys or an AutoZone and it's a tool, you probably need it for the boat. um, so, um, tools, you want to make sure you have it. Don't just go buy like the, one box Home Depot thing. You need a lot more tools than that. And then you need spares. So spare parts, impellers, belts, filters, hoses, clamps, and sealants. So, like for instance, it's not an issue that goes, it's every 20, 30 years you might need to replace the seal kit on a hydraulic ram, which in hindsight, the boat's 30 some years old and it still had the original ram on one side. So I probably should have had a spare for it. I didn't. So I had to cruise around using the emergency tiller for a few days and then have somebody bring one into me. It's not always easy to get it here. Luckily, I was talking to somebody and they had crew flying in. So they were able to bring it. And then, obviously you need plenty of, for as long as you're going to be in, fuel filters, hoses, belts. You never know when a belt may break. You need, spare filters for your water maker and all these things, and air filters for the engines and all that stuff. So you need spares, and you need raw water pumps. You need water, freshwater pumps. You need all different kind of, there's those things go out quite a bit. Pumps, and especially like freshwater pumps, like if the pump keeps running for some reason and you're out of water, it'll burn that pump up, and there you go. You need a new pump. So you always want to have at least one or two spares. One is none, two is one, right? I think that's the old saying, something like that. A sail repair kit. You need to be able to, no, you have to put a big rip in your sails. You need to be able to put that little sail tape on there and fix it. And rigging tools. Electrical connectors, fuses, and a multimeter. Multimeter, I use that often. You need to know how to use your multimeter, and you need to have a good multimeter. Don't get the cheap one. Get the good one that it can handle a bunch of stuff and do a bunch of different things. And then you need electrical connectors, all different types of fuses and different sizes and different shapes and different kinds. Uh, like I had a switch go out the other day, the rotary switch for the engine, getting from power from the start battery, and it just went dead. I was able to bypass it, but it'd be nice if I had another one of those. So there's a ton of things and spares that you need that you're never going to have enough spares. and I'm pretty fortunate. Like this boat has always had, even before I bought it, the previous owner had a ton of spares on here, and then the one that I, the previous owner had a ton of spares, and then the previous owner had a bunch of spares too. All right, now you're looking at marine growth and hull maintenance. You need regular bottom cleaning and hull checks. So I just had this bottom painted. You should probably have, okay, the bottom paint is an ablative paint, meaning when a little organism comes up to the side of your boat and attaches to it, that a paint will eventually just kind of ablate and fall off, and the organism falls off. Say like either you know, oh, I've gone blank on the types of animals, but whatever. Uh, and so they'll fall off. Now you need to have your bottom painted every 1 to 2 years, and so that requires pulling the boat out of the water. Most of the time, you can probably do 3 or 4 episodes where you just maybe a light sanding, like in places that like have it flaking off. But for the most part, you can do 3 or 4 times of just painting over the old paint. You need to have it clean though. Wash, wipe it, spray it with a pressure sprayer to get all the gunk and all the crap off of it, and then you can paint it with that ablative marine paint. And but I just got the job done on this, and they use this 2-year stuff from Total Boat, and I haven't had to clean this hole yet once. A lot of the times, especially if you get old, once your ablative paint gets a little bit older, you will have to go out and scrub the hole a little bit. You just get a scrubbing brush, this thing right here is, get something like that. You can scrub it off, and then you can get like a plastic scraper that you use for like drywall and stuff to scrape off the barnacles. Thank you. I thought of the word barnacle. And so, you're gonna have to snorkel to do that, or have some other way. We have the Nomad, the blue Nomad. There's a link in the description if you'd like to get one. Blue Nomad tankless dive system, so I can have the tank sitting on the deck, and I've got a 30-foot umbilical, so I can go all the way under the boat and just stay underwater cleaning and all that. Um, and then while you're down there doing all that, check your through holes, right? Make sure there's not too much growth or barnacles like growing, or maybe on your underwater lights or stuff like that. Check the prop and shaft while you're there. Make sure they're clean. So I put prop speed on our prop, which is, it's kind of like a silicone, and it keeps I don't know if it's necessarily ablative, but it discourages barnacle growth and stuff on the props, because anything metal in the water will instantly get stuff growing on it if you don't treat it like barnacles and stuff. Anti-fouling paint, there you go. So now on to troubleshooting on the water. You need to be able to diagnose common issues underway. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that lately, where my motor won't start. So okay, why won't it start? I just go, generally, if it's not starting, okay, is it trying to start? Is there nothing happening? So most of the time, my first place I go when the motor won't start is I go to the starter. I check, is it getting power from the start switch? Okay, it is. Is it getting power from the battery? Okay, it is, or it isn't. Like in this most recent case, it wasn't getting power from the battery to the starter, and then that just ended up being a switch problem. Or like, for instance, the time before when that happened, so the starter solenoid has, so the way the solenoid works is you send power from the start switch down to the solenoid, which engages a relay in there, which takes power from the start battery and sends it to another end of the starter, which engages another relay, which makes the because these are all, until now, they've been really small, like 12 gauge wires, and then it gauges another relay that takes power from a big like 2 gauge wire that's coming from the battery, and that's what starts turning the motor, because it's a lot of amperage going through there. And so then I don't even know where I was going with that. I just kind of got lost. I've been working on that crap so much lately. But anyway, so I had a loose wire on there, and so it just took me a while to figure out I had a loose wire. And it could be anything else too. Like, oh man, what else have we been doing? Okay, for like the other day, we were sailing, and all of a sudden my autopilot starts going off course. I'm like, what's going on? And I look at it, and it's not. Even though we were turning to starboard, it wasn't turning the rudder back to port. It wasn't correcting it, but the autopilot was on. And so then I turned it off. I turned my wheel. There was no hydraulic fluid left, because that seal had blown. So there was no hydraulic fluid in the boat. So my first thought was like, okay, because I have had a very slight hydraulic leak at the helm, but it's like a drip every, not very often. And so, I mean, I knew this was a major loss of fluid. So then I went to where the most likely place to lose fluid is one of those rams. So I opened up on my bed, looked at it, and sure enough, yeah, I mean, we were losing. It was just peeing out. The hydraulic fluid was just peeing out of the back of that hydraulic ram. And so, well, there you go. Now I know exactly what my problem is, and you have to take actions to remedy that. Like, so I had to get out my emergency tiller and use emergency hand steering tiller, which was not fun to do on this boat because I can't steer the boat and use the throttle at the same time using the emergency tiller. So it's a pain in the butt. But you need to be able to diagnose things, and I'll give you some ideas on how you can get better at those things in a bit. But the most important thing is you have to stay calm when something happens. Like, you can't freak out and go, okay. You can't freak out with your hair running on fire, on fire, running around like, what do I do? What do I do? You're like, okay, I have to take steps. What is the most likely cause of this? Let me investigate why this is happening. And, it's kind of like in aviation. So I was a pilot, obviously, if you don't know. And so, like, well, the first thing they say when you're having a problem, fly the airplane first. Okay. So you may be having all kinds of crap going on. You got your bells and whistles going off. If you're concentrating on those bells and whistles and you're not flying the airplane, you're going to crash the airplane. Fly the airplane first. Get your current situation under control. So sail the boat first. Get your current condition under control. So in that instance, when I lost my steering with the rudder, and it takes me 10 minutes to get the emergency rudder up because it's not easy to do. It's big and it's bulky and has to go through the deck, and it takes me 10 minutes to do that. Well, so the first thing that happened when I noticed I lost my steering is I just assessed where I was. Is there shallow water on either side of me? Are there rocks ahead or whatever? Luckily, we were in an area that was pretty wide. It was 10 feet deep for a mile in any direction. So I just brought the throttle back to, almost idle. I just kind of left little minimal steerage. So it was not exactly tracking. It was still not tracking where I wanted it to, but it was just minimum steerage to get there. And then I went about and started getting the emergency tiller ready. Now, had it been different, say there was shallow water right here, you know what? I would have stopped the motor and I would have dropped my anchor and then deal with the problem, get everything ready, and then go. So you have to like sail the boat first, then solve the problem. So, and then you need to keep records, because I don't, you keep maintenance records on when you change the oil, when you change the filters. Like, I'm bad about this. I don't always do it. Like, I changed the fuel filters the other day. I didn't write it down. But what I will do is I'll write on the filter the date I changed it and then the hours on the engine. So that's a good way to do it. But it's also better to do maintenance logs so that, like, when you go to sell this boat, you can say, I did an oil change every 4 months, or every 200 hours or whatever. I changed the fuel filters every 6 months or whatever, and they can see a log of that, and you can even keep the receipts of that, and then so they know you've been maintaining that engine, you've been maintaining that motor, you've been maintaining the sails. Like, okay, a year ago I had the sails, the rigging tuned, so it's a number one, it's better for you because you know that, and number two, if you're going to sell the boat in the future, you have all these maintenance records that you can show someone. There are apps that you can do for all that too. I'm sure you can just Google them there, but there's quite a few that you can keep track of all that, so you don't actually have to write stuff down. And also it does help with insurance claims. Like, if uh, say the motor stopped working, and then they look back and say, well, you hadn't changed the oil in 5 years. Well, no wonder they may deny your claim, right, from your negligence. So, but if you have, look, I change the oil every, 4 months or whatever, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is, then you can prove to do that. All right. So budgeting for maintenance, general rule of thumb, and I'd say this is more likely for the bigger boats, but not necessarily, is 10% of the value annually is what it's going to cost you in maintenance. I don't necessarily know that that's true. Maybe if you include like haul outs and all that stuff, but like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Say you buy a $200,000 boat, you're not going to spend 20 grand on maintenance. I mean, maybe one year you could spend 30 if you have to like have the engine rebuilt or something, but like mostly if you're doing, especially if you're doing your own maintenance, if you're doing your own oil changes and all that, I mean, I would say 5% maybe, like, I don't know how much I'll spend on maintenance on this boat. I mean, I'm definitely not going to spend 20 grand. I had to buy a new seal kit that was $150. I did buy a replacement hydraulic pump for the autopilot because the first one, the one that's I never replaced it, it's still in there. It had some bad brushes, so now I have another one. And then if I ever have to replace it, I can just take that old one out and get the brushes rebuilt, and it's good to go. But then, you know, maintenance other than that, I'm not going to spend 20 grand on this boat. I'm not going to spend 10, maybe 10 in maintenance on this boat. So, and so, but if you can do all that yourself, that's going to save you a lot of money. I mean, yeah, okay. I guess if I had to pay somebody to do oil changes and filter changes and all that, it could cost that much money, but I do it all myself and it doesn't cost that much money. So, and then another thing is you have to choose when and where you're going to do the major work. Okay, we're in the Bahamas. I know that. So like, there's things that I have deferred right now. What am I thinking of? Uh, okay, like replacing the switch for the generator and battery, for the motor and generator battery. Um, getting that part is not. I'll be back in Florida in a month, and I can change that stuff out there. So you can defer maintenance that is not necessarily done right now, but in the Bahamas, I might be able to find one of those in Nassau. I probably can find one in Nassau, but I don't want to go to Nassau. So and then so get work done when you can too. So like you're sitting, it's the off season, you're in the hurricane season, so you're up in the Chesapeake or wherever, you're in North Carolina or something, maybe you have the boat on the hard. That's a great time to get a lot of boat work done, because it's going to be easier access because the boat's not in the water, or maybe it is in the water but it's at a marina or somewhere where you can get the parts and the supplies a lot easier. And then referrals on boat maintenance. If you do need a professional, try to get some referrals. There's plenty of apps. Like I've been using, it's a pretty cool app lately. It's called No Foreign Land. I've been using that one lately, and there's a lot of good tips and tricks and stuff on there. So I've really enjoyed using that. So and basically you got to get to know your boat, and that takes time. You might feel a little lost in the beginning, but it takes time to learn your boat. And after, like, honestly, it's going to take a couple years till you feel really comfortable with all the maintenance on that boat, probably. But there are ways that you can kind of jump ahead on that. I mean, there are all kinds of, so for instance, Island Spirit in Thailand, they have a world cruising course. So if you check them out there, I think I'll put a link somewhere for it in the description for this. They have a world cruising course, which I don't recall offhand. I think it's like 2 or 3 months long, but you go there and you're building a boat basically. I mean, you're not actually building a boat. You're going through a boat and you're learning how to diagnose all these issues, and you're doing it hands on, and you're learning, how to change an impeller, how to do the oil, how to change your fuel filters, what sound, is making this sound, what is that? You're learning all that stuff. So if you really are a novice and you really want to get more confident with your knowledge and all that, maybe take a world cruising course. And if you're going to go out cruising, say you're going to go cruising for the next 5 or 6 years, what's 3 months of making sure you really know what you're doing? If you're not very mechanically inclined, you know what I mean? So you have that extra layer of knowledge and safety. And then, there are, I'm sure there's online courses you can take too. So, like for instance, you can go, sailingdoodles.podia.com. At the, I think, captain level, you get access to my maintenance courses, which basically, I think there's like 12 or 15 of them where I teach you how to change a raw water pump. I teach you how to change a heat exchanger. I teach you how to change an impeller. I teach you how to change your oil. I teach you how to do all those things so you can join that and you get access to those videos. So actually, one thing, I don't know if I'm going to do it today. It's Cinco de Mayo when I'm recording this, and we're about to go have margaritas. So I don't think I'm going to do it today because it's a really gross job. I got to change a macerator pump in the master cabin. Macerator pumps are basically, think of it like your kitchen disposal. It's got like blades, and like it sucks crap out of your sink and chops it up and then sends it down the tube. Well, a macerator pump does that with your poo. And so when you flush the toilet, all the gross goes into a holding tank. And then when you're offshore, you can turn on your macerator pump, which sucks it out of there, chews it up, and spits it out into the water as you go by. Well, the problem is that macerator pump is not working. It's just, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it sounds like it's on, I don't know, it's wheezing and it's not turning. But anyway, I've got a new one, and so I need to change that. And it's gross because you have to open up all that tubes, and it's not like the inside of those pipes are clean. So I'm really not looking forward to that. Uh, uh, I'll do that tomorrow. But anyway, guys, I hope you found this maintenance information. I hope you learned something, or I hope you inspired you to get out there and do something. I think my next podcast is going to be with. I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything. So if you want to join either our Patreon, the Sailing Doodles Navy, or you can become a channel member on the Sailing Doodles channel, I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything where you can ask me anything and I will answer your question on the next podcast. So thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe this video. Make sure this is a separate channel from Sailing Doodles. This is the Doodles Podcast. You can also get this wherever you get your audio podcasts, on Apple or Spotify, wherever. So thank you guys, and we'll see you on the next video.